I have the pleasure of introducing our invited speaker today. David Skuodas is a civil engineer, a project manager, and a storyteller. David works for the Mile High Flood District, which serves cities and counties around the approximately 1,600 square mile metro Denver area. Mile High Flood District is a different kind of urban flood district. From what I've learned from David already, it's very different from my flood district that I work for. I'm the service provider for. His district works to maintain flood conveyance alongside environmental compliance and stewardship of waterways. He's helped build multi-objective urban waterway projects that are functional community assets rooted in nature-based solutions. So of course, as a civil engineer, David believes that understanding geomorphology is essential for project planning and design. Good job, David. Most recently, David's career has shifted a bit from project delivery towards education and outreach so that he can tell the stories of innovation and balance in urban waterway design. Of course, you can read a lot more about David in his bio in your program, or on the Mile High Flood District website, or on his own website, theeffectiveclient.com, where he advocates for project owners to act in their own best interest by being good clients that promote teamwork, care for people and businesses without weighing down projects with administrative process burdens. Good advice. A fun fact about David, he was originally from Nebraska after graduating college, but after graduating college in Florida, he tried to join the Coast Guard, but was actually turned away because of a bone spur. He really liked the mountains, so he made his way to Colorado and the Mile High Flood District. David's talk is titled Balancing Nature and Community in Urban Waterway Design. Welcome, David.
Thank you, Judy. I didn't know you were going to tell people about my bone spur. Jeez. We had about a half-hour conversation where she wanted to take some notes to figure out her introduction, and it was a very vulnerable feeling sitting there thinking about which of those 30 minutes she was going to cherry pick, but I really appreciate that. So I'm going to talk about restoration in the urban context, and most of my examples are going to be on streams and creeks, less so on rivers. You're not going to see many fish in my examples. There is one project I threw in there very intentionally that includes fish passage because I knew what conference I was coming to. But yesterday when I was sitting through the conference, I saw lots of examples of human impacts. I saw much fewer examples of projects showing humans and their homes and things like that. But two that I noticed in particular, one was, of course, the LA River. And I'm still kind of processing that they have 54 holes of golf in their project area. And I don't know about you all if you've worked near golf courses or in golf courses with a project, but you start talking about moving fairways and the golfing community gets deadly serious. I mean, the sense of humor goes out the window completely. But then there was the Austin project I noticed was near a home. I saw a home in a picture there, so I'm curious to see that lightning, the poster project later on. And then I really appreciated Reed's introduction remarks, the story about the pebble that traveled 250 miles here with him. I'm going to have to find an opportunity to borrow that story, so I'm thinking I might try to find a pebble in a creek here before I leave so it can travel 1,000 miles back with me to Denver. But Reed said one other thing that caught my ear. He said more than one other thing, but one other thing I'll mention is that he said we're mostly here to talk about water and fish and plants and rocks. And I am a civil engineer, and I didn't learn about many of those things in school, definitely not plants or fish or rocks. I did learn about water. I learned about soil, I learned about steel, and then I learned about concrete. And civil engineers, God bless us, we love our concrete. And here, let me demonstrate. All right, you guys do have a sense of humor. I love that. Yeah, I made that video, that sarcastic little video around 10 years ago, and it makes me kind of sad because over time it's a little less obvious that's me because I've gotten all salt and peppery and I got a beard now, and then I also can't jump that high anymore. So it makes me a little bit sad. But yeah, that is the stereotype about how engineers like me view waterways, because in school we learn nothing about plants or fish or people, really not much about rocks, but it turns out they all can have a major role to play in successful restoration outcomes along streams and rivers. So my agency is focused on flood risk, and that's hugely important, but floods don't happen very often. So how are we also designing for nature and community? These things can and should coexist, but it takes intention. If we get it right, we're not only making our communities safer from flood risk, but we're also making them more financially sound, healthier, and more livable. So as we make decisions that impact these vital shared spaces, we have a unique opportunity, and I would say a profound responsibility. Decisions we make have an enormous impact on what's possible or not in these special places where land, water, and people come together. But most of my job involves fixing or undoing previous land use and infrastructure decisions. And this isn't about judgment. My predecessors did the best they could with what they knew at the time and the societal approaches to infrastructure. But how do we learn from the past and make better decisions now? Now, some of this learning is technical, yeah, but it's also financial and philosophical. So I'm going to show you what I mean with a lot of real project examples, some data, some graphs and maps, but also lots of pretty pictures and stories. So as Judy mentioned, I work at the Mile High Flood District. We're a special district that encompasses the greater Metro Denver area, and we facilitate the rhyme and reason to how waterways are managed as they cross 40 city and county boundaries. We have one river we manage, the South Platte River, so there's 41 miles of that, but we have over 3,000 miles of what we consider regional waterways. So a lot of my examples are going to be on these smaller first, second, and third order streams, but the principles I'll be sharing can be very scalable. For folks that haven't been to Denver, we're at the foot of the Rocky Mountains, not really in the mountains. We only get around 14 inches of total precipitation per year. The mountains limit westward expansion, but we have lots of room to sprawl to the east if we can find enough drinking water, which is not a certainty. We have some older parts of town too, so it's this interesting mixture of older at-risk neighborhoods that were built before we planned around flood risk, and total greenfield development and everything in between. Our primary services are shown here. The columns in dark blue are services focused on understanding and improving physical places. I would note that we are involved in the full life cycle of land use and infrastructure decisions and consequences. It's kind of a mark of how long you've worked at the district if you end up having to fix one of your own projects. It's about learning, right? Not perfection. The green column on the right shows services focused on informing and influencing people like industry partners, policymakers, and the general public. We have an annual budget around $100 million. It's from a mill levy on property taxes. And that includes a dedicated mill levy for maintenance that's around $40 million per year. That's very important. These projects are not set it and forget it. Now, we've been designing, building, and maintaining urban waterway infrastructure for nearly 60 years, and we've learned a lot, and our design approach has evolved. And in an interesting place where you can physically see this evolution is along Little Drag Creek. So when I purchased my own drone, the first place I wanted to fly was here because it has a great visual story to tell. This imagery was filmed on the same day, on the same creek, within a 2-mile stretch. These were all capital projects we helped build. You know, on the right, you see abundance. On the left, scarcity. Our designs have always been driven by conveyance, flood conveyance, and then stability goals. We don't want the creek moving around like crazy in an urban setting. Those are key, but the other goals we considered, the possibilities we pondered, were pretty limited. Now, in fairness, some of those older projects were built because people were flooded. This photo from the 1980s is right after a flood that impacted the buildings in the background. The concrete lining work in the foreground hadn't extended that far yet. So these highly confined and structural projects dramatically improve flood safety, but not much else. That's actually our executive director standing there with his hands on his hips back in the 80s. So it's clear with the newer project what else is possible along an urban waterway beyond conveyance and stability. So here we're not looking at water as a variable to be controlled, but a force to collaborate with, to create a multitude of ecological and social benefits. I like to call this blurring the lines. We're blurring the lines to let different functions share some of the same space. Now, I personally worked on this project, and one of my proudest career moments came recently when I was chatting with a young environmental scientist. He told me that when he was going to college downtown at Metro, he would park at this train station and ride the beeline to school every day. And every day he looked out the train at this project, and he told me it inspired him to become an environmental scientist. And I was like, oh man, I wanted to hug the guy, but I didn't want to make it weird. But I don't get stories like that very often, but I share that because, it's the kind of social impact our projects can have. It can inspire people like that. Now, flood protection is largely driven by hydrology and hydraulics. These are foundational to our work, but I think of them as kind of the black and white aspects of what we do. Not necessarily easy, but they're quantifiable and mathematical in ways we're very used to. Now, upon this black and white foundation, we also consider these other elements of urban stream function. And I'm going to use the word urban a lot because that's where most of our work resides, but the principles could apply in more rural settings too. But we use this to help us make more intentional societal choices about what successful waterway infrastructure looks like for a given context. So one of the ways I think about this, if the H&H is the black and white, then the other elements bring color. The browns, the greens, the other colors of the rainbow. Helps us take projects from good to great, makes them community treasures and not just utilities. We don't have salmon in Denver. We do have some in Colorado, I came to find out, but not in the Front Range of Colorado. They're in like the Gunnison River and Colorado River, but not in Denver. So fish habitat doesn't show up for us here, well, like I'm sure it probably does for many of you. So when we talk about multifunction, these are where we start, and we give these equal consideration on our projects. They don't necessarily get equal investment, but we give them equal consideration to find what's the right balance on a project. And we balance them with capital and life cycle costs and the context we're working in. And we don't consider any of these as nice to have or icing on the cake. We feel responsible for finding the right combination, whether it's getting creative with our own funding or finding money from others who can help. Waterway projects make a lot of decisions around topography and space allocation. And so if engineers like me are making decisions in a vacuum, then we can really limit what else can happen in the same location. Now, it also doesn't serve to focus just on any one or two of these and dogmatically just focus on the one and ignore the rest. That usually isn't the right answer, and it just depends. But let's do a little thought experiment to see what this can look like if we get dogmatic about one of these and ignore the others. And this is going to be with some AI renderings, and this is going to poke a little fun at some really extreme versions of projects. So just go along with me here, okay? All right, so this is an eroded reach of Cherry Creek in Denver, and let's say we want to improve it, and we only focus on flood goals, engineering goals, moving water from point A to point B. You can imagine what this would look like. It'd be the LA River, right? And let's say, we're worried about velocity, so let's include some baffles in there. We don't want people thinking there's a trail down there. I mean, my goodness. All right, I'm glad you guys are laughing. These are meant to be funny. All right, it's good. All right, let's have some fun if we've thought of this as just a nature preserve. This is not for people. This is a nature preserve. We're going to put in a trail closed sign. You can't tell, but we've planted some poison ivy and some thorn bushes. We're going to reintroduce some fish, maybe some apex predators while we're at it. We're going to throw in a grizzly bear, maybe a pack of wolves. Why not? It's like Yellowstone in the city. It's fine. That's time and a place. Okay. All right. Let's switch this around and just focus on people. This is only a place for people. We're going to make it a paradise for people, and so we're going to manicure this. It's going to have lots of clean lines. All the turf is mowed into perfect strips. Every tree has a seat wall around it. We've got an amphitheater, public art. And let's amp this up another level. Let's go ahead and color the water with some dye, just to complete the Disneyfication. Well, let's give geomorphology a turn. If we only focused on geomorphology and we thought, what did this creek look like in nature before humans existed anywhere in this watershed? Well, it was a braided stream. Let's go back to that. Any of these projects could be the right answer somewhere, okay? And all I'm trying to imply is that we need to find the right balance. So we got to find the right balance between these. That's very contextual, and every project site is going to be a little different. So this is going to show the actual restoration we built. That's only a year or two post-construction, so I rendered what it will mature into. This is the balance we achieved given this context next to a road, next to homes, and with the hydrology we're dealing with, the sediment load. And then my presentation cover photo is a real photo from this project site that shows you that balance of ecological and societal functions all in this one very real non-AI. I did not AI that bird in there. I really got that, promise. But this project existed before we figured out how to articulate and simply explain our design approach to others, so this is where the 5 elements have been helpful. A different project would need to strike a different balance. But hydrology is foundational to these outcomes, so let's dig into a quick hydrology anecdote. So when you see a stream or river in nature, you're seeing an outcome or result. I stole that phrase from Luke Swan a few years ago. And that result is largely driven by climate, geology, and hydrology. And the stream functions pyramid from Will Harmon helps us understand how these base layers drive outcomes of the layers above. Our 5 elements were a derivative of this pyramid. Now we can't control climate or geology. We don't really control hydrology, but we do influence it with how we mitigate urbanization with detention basins and green infrastructure. So let's look at an example of the role urban hydrology plays in stream stability and nature-based design. So this is Marcy Gulch in a Denver suburb called Highlands Ranch. Here you see it completely unraveling. This is the Marcy Gulch watershed in 1993. As you fast forward just 6 years, you can see all the development that took place, and then by 2010, it's pretty much fully developed. A few notes about how this watershed developed from a stormwater management standpoint. You see detention was implemented at the dots on the map. The purple dots only mitigated for 10 and 100-year peak flows. They left a lot of room for the stream. The thinking at the time was no stream stabilization should be necessary because of the online detention. So it was left untouched. That was our approach, preserve a wide corridor and then mitigate for some of the peak flows. So let's see how this played out. And we're gonna zoom in on this downstream area in the Highlands Ranch Golf Club. We've got the Highline Canal as a water supply ditch that crosses there in yellow, and then you've got 3 crossings there for a trail and for the golf course. Now, as we look just downstream at the mouth, you see a pretty good plume of sediment coming from Marcy Gulch. When we get to 2006, you see some wounds on the landscape, and then at the mouth, there's more sediment. In 2007, banks are really opening up, and then at the mouth, there's even more sediment. And then by 2010, it basically looks like a bomb went off, and now we have an excavator digging sediment out of the river. It's that little orange dot in the center. So here is what it looked like from a bird's eye view, and then here on the ground. We had something like a 25-foot head cut move through here. We had trees falling over. We had threatened golf course, and then here are those 3 crossings I mentioned earlier. The erosion paused momentarily at the golf cart crossing, and then another storm hit and wiped it out. The footings on this ped bridge were already hanging from the bridge, and then the next storm hit, took it out. This flume carries a water supply canal over the creek. There's concrete footings at the bottom, and now how much they're exposed. These were the consequences in the receiving stream stemming from the land use and stormwater management practices at the time, so the hydrology. The stream fell apart because in its native state, it wasn't equipped to handle urbanized runoff. Now the base of the pyramid changed, so it impacted everything else. The detention basins reduced flood risk, but they did not recreate the natural hydrograph. They didn't make it natural. I would argue they can't really make it natural. So a restoration project was designed. All that sediment had to be replenished. The slope was flattened from 1.8% down to 0.2%. It's really sandy soils, and we used several expensive drop structures like this to control the hydraulics and protect the sandy bed material so that in between drop structures we could rely on vegetation for stability. And so this is what it took to get this reach of stream back into balance. This shows a few before and after images of what the restoration achieved. And so this example demonstrates why native streams are usually incapable of handling urbanized runoff without severe erosion. But it doesn't mean nature-based solutions are dead on arrival in an urban setting. It just means that we can design them to look and mimic nature, but they need to withstand quite unnatural flow regimes. So we see this as going forward with a healthier, more balanced relationship with nature, given the flow regime we have to work with. Okay, so on this next example, we were building a stream restoration in that area in red ahead of most of the development. So think of it as a pre-storation to prepare the stream for urbanization. The most cost-effective time to build waterway infrastructure is before the watershed develops. So here you see all the planned development. At this site, the existing bed materials were a fine clay, so more cohesive than the sand at Marcy Gulch. I'm really standing in the creek bottom there. That's the creek, all right? They're still prone to erosion, but with both our cross-section and our plant palette, we considered what is going to be the flow regime when we build the project, and what is this going to mature into as the area develops. We were building this before there were many sprinklers or leaky water mains upstream, but we knew they were coming. It was actually studied around Denver that about 70% of our base flow is drinking water, which is interesting in our streams and creeks. So we spent a lot of time looking at the active channel cross-section. You know, it plays a big role in determining how natural we can make this stream look and behave. So we designed the section in green based on today's flows, and then we added lateral riprap where we think the width may eventually be in red after the watershed fully urbanizes. So we're allowing this creek to wiggle a little bit. The purple lines show the active channel in plan view. So an important point about the riprap, in nature, streams move, of course, and that's a healthy thing. We were mimicking natural form and processes with constructed riffle pool sequences. The unnatural hydrology meant that some rock was needed for stability, but we actually don't want our active channel to move around the valley like it would in nature, because rock like this doesn't exist anywhere in the upstream watershed. You know, natural streams have rock bed material that can migrate in from upstream as things move around. We don't have that luxury here. This shows the native bed material. So any rock we put there, we need to stay put even in a major flood. Here are a few photos of the project before, during rock placement, and then after. So I call this design a bit of a cyborg. It's part natural, part unnatural. This is one of the ways we've learned to collaborate with nature rather than trying to strictly control it. Now this design relies heavily on vegetation. Colorado's semi-arid, so we didn't have irrigation here. It took us 5 years to establish healthy native vegetation. Does it take you guys about a month with all the rain you have here? When I was driving here, I saw moss on a Jersey barrier. It blew my mind. I can't even tell you. I was like, they have vegetation on the Jersey barrier. Very jealous. All right. But we have an internal environmental group that takes over these sites for us and does a great job, because resilience can't just be built, it has to be grown ecologically. For us in the past, 10, 20 years ago, environmental folks were primarily involved to help us just with permitting. But when we rely on vegetation for stability, the ecologists have become mission critical beyond permitting. We formed our first environmental team around 5 years ago. So they do help us with permitting and compliance, but they also help us with vegetation establishment and daily stream management in ways that engineers like me are just never going to be interested in. So pretty much once the yellow iron leaves the site, once heavy civil construction is done, I'm pretty much emotionally over it. So I'm really glad the environmental folks are just like jumping for joy to get in during this part. It's great. So this project is preventing stream degradation, and not only is this more cost effective to do preemptively, but we also prevent pollution. This next imagery goes back to the Cherry Creek project I showed you earlier. We had a few PhDs study this project to quantify how much the stream restoration reduces pollution on a yearly basis, and you can see the numbers there. So this was a restoration after the fact, so clearly our pre-storation is preventing similar pollution altogether. All right, a quick note about how we use riprap. The only place we use conventional riprap, like just a pile of plain rock, is in locations where no vegetation will grow, like under a bridge. For riprap bank protection that prevents lateral migration, we fill the voids with soil, cover it with topsoil and erosion control fabric, and vegetate it. As the roots grow down through the rock, it gets even stronger, and we don't have to look at all that riprap. Where we need riprap in stream beds to prevent vertical migration, we fill the voids with a mixture of smaller rock to create a dense rock matrix that mimics mountain stream beds. Here's a quick video showing us mixing the void fill riprap. It takes a lot of space to stockpile materials and mix it, stick it in a truck, transport it to the location. Here we're building a constructed riffle. and they have to work the mix a bit once it's in place. And here's what it looks like as a finished product before we place any topsoil, maybe on the banks. Here we're vegetating the banks, and then here are some examples of finished constructed riffles. They look like God put those there, and that's what we're after, infrastructure that looks like nature. But very much constructed from materials from a quarry. This combination of rock and vegetation becomes stronger over time, not weaker like gray infrastructure that's strongest the day you build it and then gets weaker every day after. But nature-based solutions aren't just about chasing greener solutions for their own sake, they also make total economic sense, so let's talk about money. This graph is a simple illustration of life cycle costs for infrastructure projects. We have this initial investment and then this period of low cost that feels really good. It could span the remaining career of the people that worked on the project. It's great. You never have to think about it again. But while it's unrealistic to expect our projects to last forever, some of them age less gracefully than others. So we get this second curve when they need to be fixed or even replaced. And the more confined and structural our solutions are, the more likely that second hump becomes and the bigger it gets. So not only were these projects expensive to begin with, I don't know why they're doing it that way. They're up in the mountains somewhere, I'm not sure. I don't know if they had to like hoof all that in on a backpack or something, but so these projects are expensive to begin with. They get expensive again because the structural solutions get weaker over time. So as an example, there must have been a great corrugated metal pipe salesman around Denver in the 1980s because so many of them are failing. And we had one community had so many sinkholes like this from failing CMPs, they started to name them like hurricanes. This culvert's in a 30-foot embankment under Broadway Boulevard, so it's a big red hump. With the more naturalized solutions, not only are they less expensive up front, except perhaps in land, they tend to age better because vegetated solutions get stronger over time. Maintenance is more about gardening than it is about replacing concrete and steel. Looks more like the green curve. On the Little Dry Creek project I showed you earlier, the recent project costs us only about $2 per foot per year for routine maintenance. It's the little green blips. The older project costs us nothing per year right now, but when that concrete needs to be replaced, it's going to be about $2,000 per foot. It protects people from floods. It's been an asset, but it's also a financial liability that's going to come due someday. It's sort of like a misfit part in an engine. It may work for a while, but the system is constantly trying to break that. So this is why we require larger corridors for new greenfield development, because we shouldn't have to rely on all that hardened structure. Now, nature-based goals are highly impacted by how much land we have to work with, and developers may build the first red hump, but they're usually long gone by the time the second one shows up. That's the taxpayer's problem. And it's a special kind of torture for me to repair concrete channel lining. It's expensive, it's unsatisfying, and then if you ever want to tear it out, like on this project, it becomes a capital project with a capital C, and the second hump becomes even bigger than the first hump. In this project, the original channel and the street median could only carry around a 2-year flood, and then the right-of-way was used for anything bigger. In a flood, it was hard to tell where the street stopped and the channel started, so we ended up with situations like this. Oh, whoops. No, the car. Yes, like this. That's an AI rendering. I didn't have rights to the real photo, but that really happened. Okay, we just wrapped up reconstruction of this entire corridor from fence line to fence line, and over time this is going to become a beautiful tree-lined median. That's a real picture on the right. The entire 100-year flood now fits in the channel. There's lots of buried riprap along here to give it stability, but like I said, resilience isn't just built, it's grown. Okay, one of the other financial metrics I keep an eye on is construction cost per foot. And this graph shows some recent results. You see a range of $500 per foot up to $20,000 per foot. That leftmost project is the pre-storation project I showed you earlier at a little over $500. The right bookend is this highly confined urban retrofit I'll show you later at about $20,000. The green columns on this represent naturalized channel designs in unconfined corridors. The gray are all storm drains, and then the yellow are a mixture of open channels, pipes, walls, bridges, culverts. But when I change this around to add in the design flows, we get construction costs per foot per CFS, so this accounts for scale. Because the gray storm drains don't carry as much flow, they start showing up big time here. Now this project I showed you earlier was the most expensive at $11 per foot per CFS because we rebuilt the entire right-of-way. the pre-storation was only 30 cents. So the top project was 35 times more expensive per CFS. And I'm not saying that more expensive projects like the one in the background are unworthy. That project is in an older part of town in an underserved community. The project on the left was basically in an empty field. Every project is contextual, sometimes painfully contextual, but even in a challenging context, the value we're able to create can make it worth it. But it's really clear the amount of land we have to work with has a huge impact on what's possible or not. So when we came up with the 5 elements, they were originally called pillars, but we decided pillars may be the wrong imagery because pillars need to be equal in size to hold up a bridge. So we decided to call them elements because really the point is that each project is going to have a unique contextual mix of each. That's not going to be the same from project to project. It's a balance. So on this next project, we're just getting started on a 3-mile flood mitigation project. There are over 500 structures in the Gold floodplain. The project may cost $200 million. It's in an underserved community with low tree canopy, so it's several degrees hotter than its neighbors, has a lower life expectancy, history of redlining. That makes the housing really affordable, but we may need to purchase and demolish dozens of homes to address the flood risk. So there are going to be very human consequences to the decisions we make. So we can't just think of this project in mathematical engineering terms. We have to consider humanity. So the right project here is going to be really hard to figure out, and it probably should be. But constraints breed creativity. So as we pondered more detailed design, could we redraw any of the lot lines to rebuild homes? Could we rezone some lots as multifamily to reclaim an equal amount of housing? Should we prioritize protecting homes owned by the people living in them, creating generational wealth versus protecting homes that are rentals? These are some of the things we're thinking about. And we're doing extensive community engagement because we want residents to feel like we're doing this project with them. Because be careful when you do something for people, eventually you might feel like you did it to them. So when we don't consider humanity, our project outcomes can really underwhelm. So let me share a project example of my own from about 10 years ago to illustrate. So on this Hoffman Drainageway project, we took the floodplain from the red to the blue. Off to the right, it interacts with the receiving stream. But this project was built in conjunction with the North Metro rail line in yellow. And where I failed was in not recognizing the need for mobility improvements our project could have helped with. So folks in this neighborhood, affordable housing neighborhood, walk up to 88th Avenue for basic shopping and to get to school. There are no sidewalks, so here's what it looks like for a dad and his daughter. And sorry, it's a blurry photo. I took this while driving by. I didn't want to look like too much of a creeper. But a dad holding his daughter's hand out for a walk is one of the most beautiful things in the world. But on a roadside, sort of shoulder next to a constant stream of big commercial trucks, it kind of becomes sad. And so at this North Metro crossing, this drop structure could have been moved upstream to make that culvert tall enough for a new trail underpass, but none of us thought of it because we were solely focused on flood mitigation. So all those purple trails were existing. We built some new sidewalks in yellow, but of course they stop abruptly at the rail crossing. And so I really regret not recognizing this and not being a champion for more holistic solutions because these folks deserve better. I would say everybody does. And now that that culvert's there, we may never get an underpass at that location. So we missed an opportunity to improve people's lives. I feel like we had blinders on because we were just building a flood mitigation project. And I think of that word just as like a 4-letter word. I mean, it is a 4-letter word, but you get what I'm saying. It's so tempting to just get projects done. Being more aspirational, pondering more possibilities, it doesn't necessarily make projects more expensive, but it does mean we have to work with and talk to more people. It starts to look like this graphic. Adding other disciplines, other departments, it becomes more of a dance. It makes a project feel like a program or a network. And each of those nodes and lines doesn't necessarily mean more cost, but including a village in our decision making requires more time and more sophisticated project leadership. Projects that accomplish more are harder, not easier. But value is the goal. We need to be good stewards of taxpayer dollars, but investing in cheaper projects that create less value to the community isn't doing our jobs well. Getting back to this graphic, this depicts dollars per foot per CFS. As we make land use and infrastructure decisions, we prefer to avoid costs like the ones on the right, which is easier in new greenfield developments and harder in the messy urban retrofits. But what's not on here is dollar per unit of value, because value gets beyond CFS or hydraulics. Now, I find cost is easy to quantify, so are design flows, but value can be hard to quantify. So we've been working the past few years to develop better value metrics, kind of our own version of a BCA that uses the 5 elements. And I don't have time to get into too much detail, but we take the 5 elements, we lay out common performance indicators, and then within each of these, we look at a wide array of quantifiable metrics to define how much value, how much functional lift we might gain per dollar invested for alternatives we're considering. So we basically come up with a project-specific constellation of success metrics to measure different versions of the same project against itself. And this is all intended to help us understand value in addition beyond flood protection and clean water, because it isn't our goal to build the cheapest projects possible. In the audience is Dr. Brian Murphy. Brian, where are you at? Is he here? All right, I don't know where he is, but Dr. Brian Murphy, his doctoral dissertation was about this topic. So if you want to dig into that with somebody here, he's your guy. All right, getting back to this Uvalde project I showed you earlier. We were impacting a polygon of public land. There were many different choices about how we could reallocate that public space. Clearly, the existing road section was very focused on cars. There was not much room for hydraulics, pedestrians, or cyclists. There was no habitat, no shade. So here you see it diagrammed in cross-section. So how can we make better use of the land we have to work with from left to right? Now, using the street to carry riverine flow as a non-starter because of that stranded car we saw earlier, so that gave us a bit of a starting point, so we're not going to do that. Here were the 2 cross-section alternatives we narrowed it down to from 16 that we considered. We compared the functional performance for each of these, functions like hydraulics, ecology, pedestrians, bikes, moving cars, parked cars, tree canopy. The bottom option puts some of the major conveyance underground, but the costs for each of these were similar, so we ended up choosing the middle option. This excerpt shows kind of a high-level depiction of what we call the candy buttons we use to compare different options. There was extensive community engagement to get their input, so the we in this decision-making did include the public. And I would say that a public space being great will be judged in the eyes of the people who live near it. We want this outdoor space to feel like home to them, because I don't live there. And so that means they need to feel like they're part of the process. So notice how conveyance was just one of several diverse variables that we considered in our decision-making. Now, the design project manager on this is a guy I highly admire, and he said this project achieved the best balance of any project he'd ever worked on. He said balancing of value. He was really proud of that. And so it's important to understand value, what we get for our money, and not understanding the difference between cost and value can have consequences, like, say, with tattoos. I mean, because why not? Now, some might argue that was a complete waste of $20. The $200 one is okay, but you start looking a little closer, it's kind of a sad line, and the eyes are a little bit different shape, and I'll let you all wonder if any of these are actually my tattoo. I ain't telling, but tattoos are fairly permanent, just like our infrastructure. So the cheapest tattoo possible is a recipe for regret, and the same thing goes for infrastructure. So value is the goal. So if I graph the cost versus value of lion tattoos, promise some graphs, there's a point of investment where the value goes way up, but not all additional value comes at much added cost. On the Hoffman Drainageway project, we could have added a lot more value with an underpass without spending much more money. The value creation per dollar would have gone way up. Okay, some other examples. This drop structure needed replacement, and someone had the curiosity to figure out that both the upstream and downstream culverts were due for replacement soon. And so if we just rebuilt this drop structure as is, it would inhibit improving the downstream Arkansas underpass, which is the shortest one I've ever seen. It's 6 feet 6 inches high. I have walked through this, and you're just praying nobody comes zipping through the other direction at the same time. And also, moving the drop structure also makes a new underpass here at Florida possible. So this went from a $2 million drop structure replacement to a full corridor lowering, including 2 road crossings. Became a $16 million project. But great projects find funding. They've received $6.5 million in grants and funding from multiple departments. Sometimes more is more. Projects that enhance the community beyond flood protection tend to attract more funding. This next project started as just a regional water quality basin. This location would have required walls, and it's in an old landfill. So between the walls and the landfill, the cost for the value math wasn't mathing very well, so someone had the curiosity to ask, could we move the creek and put the water quality basin where the creek is now? With this being the only stretch of Westerly Creek in the area that's never been restored, that made a heck of a lot more sense. It avoided walls and the landfill. This one started as perhaps a $2 million project, became a $15 million project that is creating vastly more value per dollar invested. It's received over $3 million in grants, and we're still hoping for more. Like I said, great projects find money. This is under construction, so you can see where the new water quality basin is going, and then the relocated stream. Those are grasscrete pavers in the bottom of the water quality basin, so those will fill in with vegetation. Looking back at our collapsed culvert on Lee Gulch at Broadway, since we've had to dig through a 30-foot embankment to replace the stream culvert, it was cheaper than tunneling. We took the opportunity to add a trail underpass for the first time. It's under construction right now, and that building on the right is a hospital, so the traffic control's been pretty fun. But it's another example of building the most valuable project we could for the money. It's better to dig through Broadway once for the culvert and the trail underpass. Now, I'm not suggesting we go and make every project more expensive, okay? But every project should find the sweet spot of cost and value. Okay, as I wrap up, I'm going to share a few final project examples to spark your creativity about what's possible in an urban setting. In this one, we were building a large storm drain outfall, and it would have been easy to build a traditional outfall like one of these and call it good. Look at all that beautiful concrete, right? Is that the baffle I hugged? I don't remember. Yeah, all right. But additional function is possible even for an end-of-pipe retrofit like this. This pipe drains an older neighborhood with almost no stormwater treatment, and there's this trickle of flow, an ooze of flow we call urban drool that comes out of it all the time. I heard somebody else say drool yesterday. I think that was Luke. But some creative folks figured out a way to put the drool to use and improve water quality by running it through a series of planters that also serve as public art for people on the trail to stop and appreciate. And so by running it through the vegetation, it has a cleansing effect before it reaches the river. And yes, it can handle floods just fine. This added some cost to the project, perhaps 10 to 20%, but it's hard to argue that wasn't at least twice as valuable as a traditional outfall. This next example, one of the most novel designs I've ever seen. There was no room for a floodplain on the sides of the channel, so they put it underneath. The project team called it a stream mullet. So it's a party on top and business on the bottom. I really wish I would have thought of that, but I love sharing. There were over 100 structures in the floodplain, and the project was able to reduce the floodplain to this. They had to thread the needle under a railroad, under a busy collector street, in between several industrial buildings. But the most special part of the project, though, is how they managed to create a multifunction naturalized channel on the surface, to convey the daily flows and the smaller storm events. That was the party on top. And then the gray conveyance is buried underneath and out of sight. It's the business on bottom. So this is animation showing you how it works. The daily flows go through the culvert at the top and feed the channel. In a bigger event, they spill into the culverts that are underneath all of that. I think it's about a 2-year flood that the top channel will convey, and then when it gets to the river, it all comes out in the same spot. Here's the completed outfall conveying some really gross flow on a rainy day. I'm not sure why it's so brown. But then here's what it looks like on a sunny day. On this next project, we were mitigating flood risk to all those structures that are in the floodplain there. We had very little space to work with. This was along some back alleys. This is the existing project, pre-project. So in order to preserve homes and alleys on either side, we had to use a walled section like this. We wanted a healthy vegetated bottom. Those are a product called Envirolock bags. We don't use those much, but this was a project where we used them. And it looked really great after a year or two. It really grew in and looked awesome. It was kind of this nice balance we found here. But after 4 or 5 years, it looked like this. Now, I'd have to check the hydraulics, but I'm guessing we didn't account for wall-to-wall woody vegetation. So this is time to tend the garden. These are not set it and forget it. So we have to be ready to manage vegetation, but thankfully weed whackers are cheaper than excavators. Here's a subsequent photo after we thin the vegetation. So nature-based solutions in the city, they require reach-specific management to continue functioning as intended. If the hydraulics here were less sensitive, if there was less flood risk, we could have let the vegetation go wild, but left untended, this would have put the homes, all that vegetation would have put all those homes back at risk. I did mention we have one project with fish passage. I'm almost sort of sheepish to show this to you because we have very unathletic fish in Denver that we were designing for. So let me show you here. So this is an old Army Corps drop structures that were unsafe for river recreation, and they inhibit fish passage, and they're starting to fall apart. The area adjacent to the river was purchased, and so a new vision for the entire 40 acres was created that includes improved river habitat, trails, recreation, and then a desire to connect people to the river. Here's a rendering of one of the planned structures. The part on the right is for the higher flows, the tubers, the kayakers. The part on the left doubles as fish passage and also to allow the less adventurous type to get their toes wet if they want. We had to design this for this catfish and then a little darter, and they need about 6 inches of depth, a 12-inch max drop height, and velocities at 3 feet per second or less under low flow conditions. And so our poor engineers had to code every little rock you see on the left there into the terrain model to model this in 3 dimensions. This is showing it with 50 CFS with maybe only 5 CFS going through the fish passage. And actually Chelsea Radabanko, who's here from American Company, who has a booth over there, she was the person who did all these mouse clicks to do this. So if you want to ask somebody about it, she's here. But it's just such a cool combination of functions and I would say blurred lines. And this is a lower part of the project that's under construction as we speak. It's very exciting. All right, so and some of you may be looking at some of these examples in these really urban contexts of trying to use nature-based designs and wondering if they can handle floods really well. And so I'll show you one last example along Westerly Creek that's downstream of the Stanley Marketplace one I showed you. This is to show you that they can. This is an engineered channel that used to sit under the runways of the old Stapleton Airport. And so when the area redeveloped, they left a lot of room for the creek. And with space for flood flows to spread out, resilience is largely achieved with healthy vegetation and some buried riprap. It's infrastructure that looks like nature. This used to be under a runway. And so I'm going to show you a series of photos taken from this bridge at the bottom right. Here you see the photo vantage point a little better. That pet bridge in the distance is going to show up in all these subsequent photos. So here's an initial photo on a sunny day. Here's the exact same view at the height of our 2013 flood. We had 100-year discharges from around 16 inches of rain. This photo was taken the very next day. And then back to the first photo, which is actually taken 8 months post-flood. So after a 100-year flood, there was literally nothing to fix here. So it's this balance of nature, risk, community that shows that we can have it all, I think. All right, so to wrap up, I started with this goofy clip showing me living on some concrete. If you take nothing else from this presentation, I hope you're inspired to think more broadly about what's possible in an urban setting. Also that I used to be able to jump, let the record show. I'd say also that the land use and infrastructure decisions we make have a big impact on what's possible, and we hold a unique opportunity and a profound responsibility to try to get that right. I hope you also understand our urban waterway philosophy that's based on around 60 years of lessons learned. I hope you appreciate that we achieve better outcomes together, but the right balance is very contextual. It's not a one-size-fits-all. I also hope you better understand some of the technical nuances to stream functions that play a big role in nature-based outcomes in the urban setting. And also you have some ways to talk about the financial metrics around nature-based solutions. Because if sometimes we need to sell people on these solutions, we have to show them with both examples and financials. That helps quite a bit. Because in the end, if we want to create abundance, if we want our communities to be not only safer, but also healthier and more livable, we have to paint with color and not just black and white. Thank you. No time for questions. Haha, I planned it perfectly. But come see me if you want to ask about any of that. Thank you.